against the Sikhs, even though PSYOP officers know the difference between a Sikh and a Muslim. Just like James Holmes, who it comes out was working with DARPA, with the brain interface program, who had a DARPA psychiatrist, a mind control psychiatrist, mind you. He was a college grad, put on welfare, put in an apartment by the government, yet was able to afford $1,000 weapons, was able to buy up police gear that you can't find in any store. Multiple shooters were seen by witnesses at the theater. Of course, you're not supposed to believe the witnesses. You're supposed to believe the news, because the news knows what they're talking about, even though they weren't there at the scene of the crime when it happened. No, witnesses said that gas canisters came from both sides of the theater. I mean, how obvious does it have to be before you accept that the state commits false flag terror attacks to blame those who are trying to wake you up? I mean, how obvious does it have to get? These extremists, who they say exist, but they themselves are creating, you know, it just sickens me that they're making constitutionalists akin to white supremacists. Okay, so then that makes me a white supremacist, quote unquote, right? What's my name? Angel Diaz? Who am I? Hispanic? I mean, do you see how ridiculous this is? They think you're that stupid. Anyways, the DHS wanted to instill the idea that veterans were being recruited to become right-wing extremists, quote, right-wing extremists, upon return from Iraq and Afghanistan. Even though that's illegal, even though, you know, I mean, unbelievable. Janet Napolitano intimated that military veterans could become instruments of domestic terror. When Napolitano's comments were met with public disdain, the DHS amended their assertion that extremist groups were highly marked, but rather it was a lone wolf type that would carry out the biggest act of domestic terrorism. When the supposed lone wolf types worked with government. Because they really do think you're that stupid. The group reaching critical will, RCW, are planning to hold a conference in New York City between August 27th to September of this year to discuss the, quote, UN program of action to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons in all its aspects. Will meet at the United Nations headquarters, i.e. victim disarmament, where they say it's to stop a war, but they have tanks, and they have weapons where they can shoot off rocket launchers, where they have hollow point rounds where they can kill people and just decimate them. Oh yeah, they're so for peace. They are so trying to help you, aren't they? They so care about you, don't they? And I mean, it really doesn't take someone with a very high IQ to figure this out. I mean, it's as plain as the nose on your face. The RCW are dedicated to working with the UN on disarmament and coercion of sovereign nations, to participate with the UN in removing the rights of citizens to have the right to own a gun. Meanwhile, they arm to the teeth, this is key, they arm to the teeth against us with hollow point rounds at 1.5 billion purchases and more. The RCW conference is meant to be a review of the UN's Arms Trade Treaty conference that was recently held in New York City at the UN headquarters. The UN's Program of Action, which is the initial effort to disarm all citizens of all nations, will be discussed and reaffirmed. And a scheme to devise a way of convincing countries to outlaw rights to firearms to citizens. Only the governmental armed forces would have access to guns. Meanwhile, Homeland Security buys up 700 pounds of RDX and 700 pounds of ammonium nitrate. You know, the RDX is to ignite the ammonium nitrate. Meanwhile, it comes out that both James Holmes and the Sikh shooter were working with the government. Meanwhile, the guy in court is not even James Holmes. So that's like a second shooter or a patsy that they framed. If you don't believe me, go to the freedomnetworkfrontlines.com, click on past breaking news, and then click on false flag terror attacks. Or I think it might be under I even forgot the link. I can't believe I forgot the link. Explosive backlog. If you click on that link, you might find it. And check it out. I mean, it's as plain as the nose on your face. Because that's how stupid they really think you are. It's pathetic. It's really pathetic. I mean, I don't even feel that great about fighting against New World Order when they don't even try that hard, folks. They don't even try that hard to cover this up. The government is the number one threat in terror. I hope you know that. I hope you figured this out already. Because I don't want to have to go over all of the false flag terror attacks in the history of the United States and show that all of the terror attacks that they've claimed were terrorists were actually them. Which is terrorist, but it's government. It's the DHS. It's the UN. It's George Soros, Henry Kissinger, and the rest of them. Because they really do think you're that stupid. Okay? This is what they're trying to do. This is how they're trying to do it. They are going to blow up buildings of innocent people, which I'm screaming bloody murder every day on, because I hope that they're going to back off. And they're going to demonize those who are fighting for freedom, peacefully, by the way, that's key. Not violently, peacefully. And then they're going to say we're violent, because we're what's left of America trying to defend you. And if you just joined this radio show and you think that I'm making this up, I'm tired of this. Go look at the information on the freedomnetworkfrontlines.com and see if I'm actually making this up. There's links to all of it. There's proof. There's documents out there showing Project Gladio, showing Northwoods, showing how the government does this over and over and over again, and they really think that you're this stupid. So I'm going to read the rest of this. The UN's Program of Action, which is the initial effort to disarm all citizens of all nations, will be discussed and reaffirmed. In a scheme to devise a way of convincing countries to outlaw rights to firearms to citizens, only the governmental armed forces would have access to guns. Meanwhile, they're going to blow up buildings and kill innocent people. Meanwhile, they go out and commit false flag terror attacks. It's not like it'd be one thing if they killed innocent people and they were just the terrorists. No, it's even worse, folks. They're terrorists that are blaming their terrorist actions on those who are trying to expose them, who are trying to help you. They are scum. By using, quote, incentives and sanctions, along with business and civil society, governments must recover stocks of firearms held by the population and dispose of them definitively, preferably through destruction. Back in July, and see, this is what they do. While they're demonizing those who are trying to help you, killing innocent people. And you're a bunch of sheep because you believe them. And those of you who have been listening to me this whole time, you're not the sheep. Okay, I'm just sick and tired of the sheep who come on this radio show and then attack me. It's real obvious, okay? It doesn't have to be any more obvious. Why would Homeland Security buy up so much bombs? Why would Homeland Security buy up hollow point rounds? Why would Homeland Security, admittedly, to some degree, put a firecracker bomber on a plane to advance their agenda? And then take credit for the bomber being caught when Kurt Haskell was the one who caught them and received threatening letters from Homeland Security. Because they really think you're that dumb. And I guess if you are that dumb and you do get killed by Homeland Security, then I guess you deserve it. You deserve to be corralled into a cage and killed with your hat in your hand. Because at that point you should realize that we tried to warn you. That we're not the enemies. Back in July, the UN held a conference in New York at the UN headquarters to discuss the UN Arms Trade Treaty, which they made up themselves, wherein they have decided they will meet to create an, quote, elaborate a legal binding instrument on the highest possible common international standards for the transfer of conventional arms. The ATT will empower the UN to literally force the U.S. government to, quote, to, number one, enact international agreed licensing requirements for Americans. Number two, confiscate and destroy unauthorized firearms. Meanwhile, they're blowing up buildings and killing innocent people and blaming it on us. They're the real terror threat. They're the ones that should be disarmed. But no, they're gonna do it to what's left of what can defend against terrorism. Number two, confiscate and destroy unauthorized firearms of Americans while allowing the U.S. government to keep theirs. Number three, ban trade, sell, and private ownership of semi-automatic guns, because that's what's left to defend against a standing army. Number four, create and mandate an international registry to organize and encompassing gun confiscation in America. We are seeing military, quote, training on our streets, the mainstream media demonizing U.S. veterans, which is what's left of defending against terrorism if terrorists were to attack again. DHS purchasing hundreds of thousands of hollow point bullets and the ingredients to manufacture IEDs. At the same time, the UN to discussing how effectively to disarm Americans, as we are supposed to continue on, quote, business as usual, as if nothing is happening. I mean, they really think you're that stupid. I mean, they basically really think you're that stupid. And if the general public is really that stupid, then I'm living in idiocracy. I'm living in a world where people have the IQ of literally 50. Drooling morons. Where I could even commit a false flag terror attack and then blame it on my enemies. Because it'll work. Because you're that stupid.